Dear guests, dear viewers, dear Lorraine, Christoph, and Stephen, my name is Benno Herz, and as the program director of the Thomas Mann House, I would like to cordially welcome you to our living room for tonight's discussion on televised democracy, media, and politics in an attention economy. When our fellow Christoph Bieber arrived in July 2022, he brought with him his fascinating research topic about the ethical aspects of smart cities, exploring the pros and cons of new digital infrastructures of urban spaces in Germany and the US. But the Thomas Mann House is also a place where fellows get the opportunity to let their thoughts roam freely. As a political scientist with a special focus on media studies, Christoph soon became interested in Thomas Mann's radio speeches, Listen Germany, in which Mann addressed the atrocities of the Nazi regime from his exile in Los Angeles between 1940 and 1945. Written in his study right over there and recorded at the NBC studios on Hollywood and Vine, the reels were then sent to London and broadcasted to the occupied territories. Digging deeper, Christoph wrote an excellent piece for our blog describing Mann's radio speeches as an early form of podcasting. You can find that on our website if you're interested in reading it. The article paved the way for further discussions among our fellows about the relationship between media formats and political coverage in today's media ecosphere. How would Thomas Mann, who was very much aware of the narrative powers in media technologies of his time, use today's devices and platforms to get his message across? Recently, at a block party here in the Rivera neighborhood of Pacific Palisades, our fellows gathered around an ice cream truck, mingling with some of our dear neighbors. It was there that Christoph and some of his co-fellows met the television producer and screenwriter Stephen Engel. In the following weeks, Stephen became a regular at our events here at the Thomas Mann House, and many fascinating conversations with our guests and fellows emerged. Inspired by Christoph's research on Mann's political use of media, Christoph and Stephen engaged in conversations about how political debate is narrated and presented in a rapidly changing political public sphere today. Also comparing the different television landscapes in the US and Germany. They talked about how political actors rely on routines, formats, and narratives originally developed in entertainment media, not only during campaign season, but also within everyday political processes such as plenary sessions or committee hearings. At the time, the almost serial style of the recent television coverage of the January 6 hearings served as a prime example. With Christoph bringing his expertise from the fields of political science and media studies to the table, and Stephen sharing his inside knowledge of screenwriting and TV production methods from within the industry, the idea for our event today was born. We are more than delighted when Lorraine Ali, journalist and television critic at the Los Angeles Times, accepted our invitation to facilitate and participate in today's discussion. She's an award-winning journalist and Los Angeles native who has written for numerous publications ranging from the New York Times to the Rolling Stone. She was formerly the Times music editor and before that a senior writer and music critic with Newsweek magazine. And just recently, she wrote a fascinating piece about biases in the news coverage of the refugee crisis caused by the war in Ukraine. Lorraine, thank you so much for being with us today and for moderating the discussion. And before I hand over to our moderator and our guests, I would like to thank my team for their help in organizing this event, Emilienne Leiko, Julia Welter, Betty Ramirez, and Boris Scharschmidt and his team. And we'd like to invite you to join us for a reception on our patio after the discussion. There will also be time to ask questions after the conversation. And now please welcome together with me Christoph Bieber, Stephen Engel, and Lorraine Ali.
Christoph Bieber is a political science and 2022 Thomas Mann Fellow. He's a professor of political science at the NRW School of Governance, University in Duisburg, Germany. Did I say that correctly?
Yeah.
Okay. His main area of research is ethics in political management and society. Bieber has published widely on the effects of online communication for political actors. A special focus is addressing the effects of digitalization for the US political system. We need you right now. This is a good time to be here. Stephen Engel is a television producer and writer, as you heard. And he has written for many hit television series, including The Big Bang Theory, Just Shoot Me, Mad About You. I know that. Dream On. Engel also created and executive produced CBS's Work With Me, NBC's Inside Shorts, and ABC's The Big House. He also teaches TV writing at the UCLA School of Theater, Film, and Television. So welcome.
Thank you.
Before we jump in, you did talk a little bit about the significance of the house and why we're here, but can you kind of attach the subject of this panel to the significance of Thomas Mann in this house?
Yeah. As you heard, I figured out maybe did Thomas Mann do something that we today would call podcasting, and that brought me to the idea to think about what would he have done if he really had lived in the media environment we do live in. And when you study his work and read his diary, or you follow the things he did here in Los Angeles. So he went to the cinema, of course, and engaged with other exiles, and he was very communicative. And so I figured out, well, maybe is there some kind of connection not only to written pieces of literature, but he would probably now also make use of the camera. And so he would probably go into a late night show and promote his new book. Or I don't think that he would be on TikTok, but maybe, but maybe some of the short pieces that he wrote in his diary, they would make a really brilliant figure on Twitter. And in fact, so that's the last thing I say to that maybe, in Germany right now there is a small Twitter account, it's called Mann Daily. And I think it's a scientist actually, and he is working on things that authors write about their own experience when writing. Am I feeling good or not so good? And he collects small pieces, and every day he puts out one tweet from the diary of Thomas Mann. And that gathered, for German, we do not use Twitter that much than here, but I think it's about 12,000 followers, and that's a lot in Germany. So you could see that there is some kind of connection. You wouldn't have guessed that, and it's exactly as Benno said, when you are here and you go into the room and you capture the atmosphere, and then you start thinking. And that's, I think, why there is a good connection to ask about media, literature, and politics, because the radio addresses were deep down into politics.
Right. And when, Steve, when we talk about attention economy, whose phone is that? Speaking of like dividing our attention.
Exactly.
But like, how would you kind of break that down?
Well, it's an interesting idea. I mean, it's always the human mind has always had a limited capacity for attention since the beginning of time. And there's so much stimulus now that it's getting harder and harder to kind of break through the clutter and get people's attention and hold people's attention. So I think about this. I like to share articles or videos that I've found with friends or with my family. And I remember sending something to my wife and children, and my children responded by saying something like, are you expecting to watch this video? It's like 3 minutes long. And I'm like, oh, well, I didn't mean to impose so much of your time. But, it started off, you'd watch a half hour television show. And then it became you needed to watch a Vine, which was 7 seconds long, and then a TikTok, which is 3 seconds long. So, it becomes harder and harder as a creator and as a writer to get and hold people's attention. And it's similarly and unfortunately the same thing for politicians. There's very little room for nuanced, detailed discussions of political issues. It's about sound bites. It's about messaging. I was reading recently about Eisenhower's ad campaigns for his television. He, I think, was the first to use television entertainment people to help him generate commercials, the whole I Like Ike campaign. And Stevenson was just all about, I'm not doing that. That's just, that's amateurish, and that's unprofessional. And he had nuanced, complex issues, and he got destroyed. It was the first thing where Eisenhower won a popularity contest by virtue of having funny, cute cartoon ads. And and Stevenson bored everyone to tears with long speeches like the one I'm delivering now.
But when you talk about a popularity contest, I mean, if you look where we are now, like the collision of entertainment and political discourse, but also the idea of celebrity. I mean, Trump came from the world of reality television. When you talk about Ukraine, Zelensky was a sitcom star, and that's why he was able to talk so well to the camera. You have Dr. Oz now, God forbid. Schwarzenegger. So this is, we're talking about sort of celebrity bleeding into this, and television changing the way that politicians are behaving and how they're reaching out to you. But could you sort of like trace it back to like a first place maybe being the Kennedy-Nixon debate? Or do you think where do you think this kind of started evolving politics more into entertainment and people needing to be entertained by it?
Yeah, I think the Kennedy-Nixon debate from 1960 is for sure it's a big thing in that development. I'm not sure whether you would really count it as the very first thing. There were radio debates before. There were the fireside chats back in the 30s, I think, but this was some kind of a breakthrough, of course, because everybody has this image in mind. There is the young, agile Kennedy and the feverish Nixon, but you don't really realize that this was only one of 4 debates that time, but everybody reminds only this one. Mm-hmm. So, and even there was a debate where Kennedy, I think, was in New York and Nixon was here in Los Angeles, and they did split screen in 1960. So there is some kind of history. And another history is also tied to this neighborhood, because Ronald Reagan lived here on San Onofre, I guess.
Yeah.
And so you all know he was an actor and then turned a politician. And well, I think it didn't hurt that he knew how to act in front of a camera. And so, and also when it comes to celebrities, there's the word of the celebritician, some kind of a mix-up with the politician word. So that goes back to maybe the early Trump, not the 2016 Trump, but the earlier version. And also Jesse Ventura, I think, a wrestler, also tried to get into politics. And so this was something that built up for a couple of decades, probably. And then you had the move, which is not a systematic one, I guess. So, but it paved the way. When you gain public attention, when you are a public figure, you get access to a lot of formats, and the people do know you. And I think that is still a really important thing when it comes to politics and campaigning. So it's not that it's important, but maybe not that important what you say or how you say it, but do the people recognize you?
And like along with that, though, if you look at like debates or campaigns, or whether we're talking about like conventions, those are like almost entertainment packages. I mean, you've come from the world of scripted narratives. I mean, can you talk a little bit about maybe how you've seen it evolve, or can you pick that out when you're watching something?
For sure. I know of plenty of people who have been, with my background, who have been involved in punching up speeches for candidates, for helping craft the entertainment package of a convention. I've never been asked. But I know plenty of people who have, and it's television is a powerful medium. I mean, the images are more powerful in many ways than words are. I mean, it's well known, of course, that a picture is worth 1,000 words for a reason. And I think back. I was thinking about it in preparing for this panel. Like in 1964, the famous Daisy ad, the famous Johnson ad campaign of the girl picking the daisies off of a flower, counting off the daisies, and then all of a sudden it turns into a countdown of a nuclear bomb exploding. Not one mention of Goldwater in the ad. I mean, they didn't need to. They didn't have to say, don't vote for Goldwater. He's going to lead us to nuclear war. It was the images did it for you. It was a 30-second ad. It swayed the electorate a lot, I think. And that became a thing where all of a sudden it was about crafting attention-getting, emotionally evocative, commercials. You think about in 1988 the Willie Horton ads, in the Bush-Dukakis election. Again, it was just sort of dog whistling, but it was all you didn't have to say anything. You just had to basically put together these pictures and these ideas very succinctly, and they would have much more impact in moving the needle in terms of poll numbers than any policy paper that anybody was putting out, or any even the debates that were, the things you remember from the debate are Nixon sweating, or Biden telling, Trump, would you shut up, man? Like, those are the things you remember. You don't remember, what was their policy about climate change? It's like, what were who got in it's like the results of scoring a prize fight. Right. Who got in the best jab? Who had the best TV moment? Who had the thing that's going to be repeatable and become viral, in the news that people are going to remember tomorrow and a week later and a year later and 10 years later. Right. So it becomes about bringing in television people to craft the narrative. So in the January 6th hearings, I was surprised to find out that it was actually a TV news executive that they brought in, Jeff Goldston, I think was his name. I thought it was just going to be an entertainment person, more of a narrative writer like myself. But it was all about docudrama and trying to figure out a way to do a compelling serialized docudrama for the January 6th. Each of the hearings had a special theme. And
they rolled it out almost like a series. Mm-hmm. And, there was a narrative arc in there. And it also, in the way that, Americans, particularly, when they're looking at hearings, they think of C-SPAN, they're like, oh my God, it's like watching paint dry, right? They don't want to watch that. Mm-hmm. But, the way that was crafted was, so you kept the attention. There was a narrative arc. And also it was really different from, say, the Kavanaugh hearings, like the SCOTUS hearings, in that there wasn't a lot of grandstanding back and forth between politicians because it was very controlled. And I thought that was like another evolution kind of in the way of packaging politics and selling an idea, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's really a qualitative leap into something new. From a political scientist point of view, you would probably say this is the first time that a political process is really getting mediated. And usually you would say you find media engagement when it comes to campaigns, communication, selling people, maybe selling some issues or not selling them, covering them. But this time here you had a process nested into the political system, and this process was brought to some kind of a new level, I guess. And so I would like to ask, when starts season 2?
I think it's coming up, actually, yes.
They are not finished yet. So
no.
And this is something in that form you would not see that in Germany, just to bring up the other.
I was going to ask you, is that really specifically American?
In this respect, the hearing, I'd say yes. When it comes to debates or ads, campaigning, well, we do have learned something from the US, and we do also have our debates. In Germany, they are called duels.
Wow.
Don't ask me why.
Is there such? Oh, okay.
Certainly sounds more dramatic.
Yeah, and I every time I try to remind people, no, it's debates in the US, it's not duels, but they stick to this. And last year they had a real problem because that was a three-way contest. So, and you couldn't do a Mexican standoff with the candidates, but then they worked out the new word of the triel. So I don't know, that probably is not a word. Trial.
Oh, okay.
Google three people.
Okay.
So, but they, of course, they focus on the contest between the two opponents, and they frame it rather like sports journalism. So who won? And in the third quarter of the debate, then Merkel made a good move. And so we do have that in Germany. But when it comes to the political process, it's like watching paint dry. Yeah. But you cannot watch because there's no camera. So the images you see from hearings in the German Bundestag is usually you see the people getting in, bringing their files, binders, and then they just smile to the camera and go into the room and close the door. Then they do their work as a caucus, and then they get back out, and then they talk to the journalists, and that's it. But you do not see what's happening in the hearings. Afterwards, maybe 4, 6, 8 months later, you get the minutes, and then you can, if it's not redacted, you can follow the ongoings, but that's it. No images, no narratives, no pictures. That's the difference.
Right.
I mean, it seems, well, let me back up. Particularly in America, I think the idea of celebrity being, someone that has to sell you the idea because you need to be entertained, right? There's just this idea that, you need this entertainment or that the masses won't pay attention unless there's a lot going on and unless you can keep their attention constantly. Do you feel like politicians have, how do I say this, like over the years or decades, had to learn how to be more like entertainers and less like politicians? And do you think that entertainment is like sort of eclipsing policy? Do you see what I'm saying? Like, or just in your...
For sure. I mean, there was a time that media covered the story, and now media is the story. It used to sort of just be a silent, objective recorder of the events, and now it's becoming the actual event itself, and everyone's got to serve the master as opposed to the master serving, the actual policy. So I was reading recently about how it becomes so meta that several of the writers of the show Veep were involved in the Democratic National Convention, and they actually were like, well, what can we do? How can we frame this in a way? And there was a writers' room, for how can we improve our messaging, because it feels like, for whatever reason, maybe because, and I don't want to get ideological here. It just seems that over the years that Republicans have had a better and easier time of kind of messaging, just a sort of a cleaner, simpler, make America great again. If there was a fifth word, half of the people, would have lost interest in what that message was, and wouldn't have fit on a hat, So it's all about like what, and everyone sort of said that in retrospect that Hillary Clinton in 2016 never had a cohesive, grabbing, really grabby, sticky message that could be easily digested and repeated and resonate with people. It became about a more new, trying to find the nuance in arguments. And sometimes, it, again, not to get into politics itself, it's sometimes easier to take an absolute argument, than it is to make a nuanced one. And it makes for better sound bites. Right. And a lot of times, I think, the Republican Party has a more absolute, abortion is murder, period. That's a 3-word where, the Democrats are saying, well, after 9 weeks, it's this, and after 12 weeks, it's this, and after 15 weeks, it's this. I don't want to get into this substantive discussion of it, but it's harder to make that a digestible, catchy, sticky policy.
Right.
People can easily just say, yeah, I understand what you're saying.
Right.
So it's about bringing in media consultants and bringing in every candidate. You don't stand a chance without it.
Right.
If you're Reagan or if you're Trump and you have camera experience and media experience and millions of Twitter followers, you've got a big leg up. I mean, there used to be an equal time doctrine. It doesn't really apply anymore because if one candidate has 40 million Twitter followers and the other one has 20,000, it's, there's no way to legislate that. You can't really say, well, that's not fair. You can't use Twitter because you have, you're getting more time than this person. It doesn't really apply anymore.
Maybe I can add one thing, because we smiled when you said that there is a writer's room for the party convention, but that not necessarily does mean that's a bad thing. So we tend to look at this the way then when media takes over, then politics gets worse. That must not be the case.
I agree. Yeah.
So we do not have writers' rooms for party conventions in Germany, but I would wish we had.
Right.
So that's not only
You have to be closer to Hollywood.
So
It could be.
Yes, there is a thing we would call a professionalization of politics, and this is, of course, letting consultants, letting experts in from the media side. And if it's dosed right, then it could be okay. It
Absolutely
should not be all over the place and pull out all the issues and the content, but it can be helpful, because in Germany you do have strange party conventions that are issue loaded, and there is a lot of talk, but it's difficult to grab what happened there. And so maybe a small writers' room would be quite good. And then maybe one other thing when it comes to comparison, we do have, I have to say that as a scientist, so the party systems differ between Germany and the US, and the parties still in Germany are much stronger. And when you want to get a job,
when you say much stronger, like, what do you mean? Like,
they're more important for the process. So when you want a job in government, you have to make your way through the party. And this is not necessarily the case in the US. You can bypass the party system. In Germany still we do have lots of members in the parties, and they care for the discussion of the issues and elaborating nuanced arguments, and that happens within the party. And to get into government, usually you have to make it through the ranks of the party to get to you have to become head of the party, and then you try to get a job in government. And that's different to the US. So you can bypass that, and so it's more politics maybe is more a people's business in the US, and in Germany still it is more a party's business.
Have there been any celebrities who have leapfrogged over the process and
not really. So after the election, what happens sometimes is that an elected official would ask a celebrity with a certain expertise in one field to join government. Maybe as a regular person, maybe in charge of one department. You had that discussion early on in the 90s when digital transformation was a new topic. Then you would go to the tech guy and ask him, would you help me out in crafting digital politics when I'm in government? But this happens not very often. And we don't have really popular tech lords over there in Germany. So sometimes you find the one or the other sports athlete who tries to convert his celebrity status into another realm, and then they join a party, and then they build up a career here and there, an actor, but you have really
Well, here we have
really
Herschel
close.
Walker is leading the
I was
is leading
just gonna say.
is leading in Georgia, for a Senate seat. And that's I'm not going to say he's not entitled to do that. I have no political experience whatsoever. But in Georgia, if when you went to the University of Georgia and won the Heisman Trophy, and that is worth something, I guess, in Georgia.
Oh, I was just going to say too. I feel like the level of celebrity is dropping. Like Reagan was a film star, and now we have we had a reality TV star, and I'm like, wait a minute, are we just like going down the path anyway? But also having cameras in the room, like if we're talking about a hearing, that can also, you're saying it's not always a negative thing, and the idea of exposing, like maybe growing fascism, or like the McCarthy hearings. We had talked about this earlier. They weren't playing to the camera, and it also exposed how awful this was and how people were being targeted. And it worked, in fact, not to gain support for that, but in fact worked against it. So like, I don't know. Can you talk a little bit about that? About like having a witness there as this process is building. Does that make sense to you?
Well, I'm not that familiar with the McCarthy.
Obviously, there are some people here who probably watched it, and there were some people here who were not born at all yet. I wasn't born yet. I've seen it, of course. But if those I shudder to think what would have happened if those cameras had not been in that hearing, and
Right.
Joseph Welch had not been the first person to have the audacity to speak up and chastise McCarthy in front of a big television audience. Who knows? I honestly shudder to think how long that might have gone on, and almost overnight, his political career was over, and within 2 years he was dead, and the whole thing was over. And that was, an example of cameras bringing light to an issue and disinfecting the political process. Where in other ways, you can be manipulating the reality of certain things with the camera and with a media consultants, but it has positive and negative impact.
Yeah, maybe one thing I could add for Germany is that politics and not actually television, but cameras had a rough start, because I think the first things after World War II you'd see were the Nuremberg trials. So and that is not a good environment you want to be in as a politician. So I think it took some decades to bring television in for politics as a serious environment. There are still quotes from German politicians when asked to speak into a camera or go to a journalist and make an interview for a television news program. They say, well, no, that's not something that a politician should do. And this is one reason why we did not have TV debates until 2002. This is the first one, dates back to this year. And in the years before, you had some debate shows with, we do have more than two parties in Germany, so you have to invite more people, and then it's not that good a show. So, but we do have what was called the Elefantenrunde, the round table of the elephants. So the party heads should talk to each other just shortly before an election. So that's what you had. And when the networks came across with the idea, well, wouldn't it be cool to have head-to-head comparisons? Then chancellors used to say, well, no, that's nothing what a politician should do. I will not sit down on a chair and talk to a microphone. That's not what I do. And Then it took until 2002, and then we had the first debate.
Well, that was at least Stevenson's attitude, and he was just caught at a pivotal moment where, he was holding on to the traditional, and Eisenhower was similar. He was reluctant to do it. He's like, I don't want this. This seems beneath me, and he finally agreed, and it won him the election. It might have won him the election anyway. He was, a hero or a war hero, but in any case, he went in kicking and screaming, and sure enough, those little I Like Ike cartoons is what really helped him take that election.
And I think still that the television format is quite strong, although we do talk since 10 or 15 or maybe 20 years about there's digital media, and they are more important than traditional or legacy media, or that. I wouldn't say that is so all over the place. So still, television has its moments, and the debates. Yesterday I watched the mayoral debate between Karen Bass and Rick Caruso, and that was a strange event, because you can see the digital tries to take over that process. They had just 1 minute time slots to make their argument. So that's the TikTok time slot.
So it's really in depth.
So totally in depth. Yeah, and that was really a strange format, but still, it's somehow made for the screen, and it lives on the screen, and then from there it goes into print media. Title page today at the Times, and then it goes viral, and of course that's much easier when you have 1 minute sound bites. You can make that into a reel, so that's easy. But still, on in the upcoming elections, not so much the midterms, but when it comes to the next election cycle for 2024 and the primaries, you will have these televised debates with a whole set of 10, 15 contenders for the presidency.
Those debates, remember those with 14 people sitting up there. It really was all about. I mean, it's sort of how I feel creating television. It's like, how am I going to be heard? It's the barriers to entry. If anyone in this room wants to do a TV show, take out your phone and point camera at someone and put it on YouTube, and you've got a TV show. There's no barriers to you doing that. The trick is, how do you break through the clutter? How do you get someone to find it? And that's what it's like if you're, Castro on a debate stage with where you're the 13th or 14th best name recognition candidate on the stage. It's like, I have 5 seconds to basically let people figure out who I am and what I stand for, and to get everyone's attention.
But still, this is a place where you find innovation and bring innovation into politics. And of course, if you are one of those 14 people standing there, then you have to figure out how to get recognized and re-recognized, and how you get attention.
I was just going to say that because in a weird way, if our attention economy is forcing us to come up with ideas that you can articulate in 30 seconds, or you're going to lose people or a minute, in some ways it forces you as a candidate to actually figure yourself out and come up with a coherent, understandable policy. There's that famous quote of I don't remember what writer it was, who sent a letter to a friend and said, I would have written a shorter letter, but I didn't have time. It's much, much harder to come up with a coherent minute, it forces you to focus it. And I have to do that in my work. I have to put a pitch together and go to a network. And before, if I can get it down to 15 minutes, they're like, well, you got to give me a log, let me have a log line, which is one sentence, and you've got to distill your show down to one sentence. And then they're like, well, can you make it, shorter, but also more entertaining? Like, okay, what do you want me to do in a minute? There's only so much I can do in one sentence. But it forces you to distill it down to the point. If you can't explain it in a sentence, then you probably don't have an idea that's going to resonate.
Right. And, even with us at the LA Times, like, we can see when we go on, like, how far readers, on average go into our stories. And it is literally probably like 2 sentences at the top. It's really depressing as a writer to know, like, oh, I just labored over this, and you read, like, in the beginning and then drop, or you just looked at the picture. So it's like it is exactly that. If you have a lead that's winding out, it's like, forget it. You've lost them already. You have to pop that at the top.
Well, think about this. If a TV show, if everybody in this room, basically, or at least your children, are watching a TV show like this, if a TV show can't hold your attention, how is Pete Buttigieg going to hold your attention? You know what I mean? Like, it's like if you can't compete for people's eyeballs, you've got to figure out a way to, when you're talking about climate change or energy policy, how are you going to possibly survive?
But there's also the idea of being someone who can harness everything. Like, for instance, Zelensky, when he's, in Ukraine, out there appealing for really the world, look at what's happening to us. He knew not just how to speak to the camera, but how to harness social media, how to, use, clips in real time that were coming off people. So, I mean, that was like kind of a master class in how to pull together all these elements and grab attention and rise above an incredible amount of noise. So that was an impressive use of everything.
And I guess that would have been like Martin Sheen becoming president.
Yeah.
Zelensky, didn't he play a president in a sitcom?
Yeah.
And then became the president.
Yes.
So imagine if, Bartlett, was that President Bartlett on the West Wing? If he had become, I'm sure everybody would have voted for him for sure, just out of feeling of like warmth they felt toward him.
Zelensky is an interesting person. So he did not only played in a sitcom, he also won the Ukrainian version of Dancing with the Stars. And he also is a TV producer. So there is more to him than only the actor side. And I think that plays out right now in his current role as the president. And he makes really good use of all those formats. And this is interesting because this is another link to that room back there, because he is doing, in wartime, speeches to the whole world, yesterday the UN, but he also addressed the Russian people. And that is basically something that Thomas Mann also did when addressing the German people in wartime. So that's a very interesting link between those figures. And in that way, Zelensky tries to act not as an actor, but more like a public intellectual, being head of state at the same time.
What was the level of Thomas Mann's celebrity in Germany at the time? Some writers don't have, I know he had won, the Nobel Prize and all that, but some writers don't have any celebrity till 50 years after they've died. When he was living in exile in the United States, was he still somebody that Germans were were interested to hear from?
Yes, definitely. So he was at the time already Nobel Prize laureate, so that is a thing still, and was at the time. And also other members of the family, the Mann family, were really present in the media. So his daughter, and she worked for the BBC. And so there was a lot of media attention around the world. But of course, Mann suffered that situation that he could not reach out to his natural audience. So he couldn't really publish in his own language at the time. So that's tough. But still, he managed to be in the debate, and of course, that's interesting in the radio lectures. So he had often a dispute with Hitler. So he insulted him in many ways, and with good insults. And sometimes Hitler also mentioned Mann. So so
interesting.
It is a name who was still familiar.
Okay. Interesting. I love, by the way, your comparison to the Mann family in the 40s as the Kardashians of Germany, essentially. That if there were reality shows there, might they have had their own Keeping Up with the Manns?
Yeah, maybe they probably would have figured out who plays to which platform best.
Wow. Very savvy, yeah.
I'm terrified of like what's going to happen next with the Kardashians. I just really don't want President Cam.
No.
Well, yeah.
I hope they don't listen to us.
Yeah, no, strike that out of there. I'm just interested to know, from the outside, what do Germans, and maybe when we go to open questions, but what are people looking at America as right now, like our political system, or how what are they looking at as since Trump, since things have become so celebrity focused? What is the view?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm not sure how to put it. So they still look at Trump maybe in fear and anger. So they fear a comeback. So second season of Trump 24. But
the reboot.
Also they were relieved when Biden and Harris won the presidency. So that calmed things down. But yeah, it's hard to say. So and I think it depends on the point where the election cycle is. So the midterm year usually is not that interesting for Germany. But when it comes to the next presidential election, and when it comes to the selection process, the candidates on either side, then there is more interest, more attention for what's happening. And still, I think they look to the US as a country to learn from. At least the politicians do that. They will attend the party conventions and they will send their aides to the US and let them look into the processes. And I guess that in some parties they have an eye on what's happening around the January 6th hearings. So that is what happens, and usually it takes maybe 1 or 2 election cycles until those ideas get to the German political system, and then they are played out in the campaigns. Maybe I should make one point. So we talked about the relationship between media and politics, and we made an effort to show that it's not only a bad thing, it's not only decline. So it could be helpful for politics to reach out and to connect to the voters, and still, and I think this is something you could learn the closer the midterms get. The Dr. Oz figures.
Yeah.
Once they are elected, they have to do actually something in politics, and there is a harsh division, I think. So, and it is useful to play the media game before an election, but after it, you have to change and you have to be a real politician. And I think some of the candidates haven't realized that yet, and sometimes the party establishment or the trained politicians in the US, not the celebrity politicians, they get an idea. Maybe it's not that clever to bring that person in front of the campaign, because when he's elected, he has to really make something in Congress or in the Senate, and well, how would that look like? Mm-hmm. And so you have to have both sides of the system in mind, and when it comes to campaigning, it's important that you are good in all the media connections. But still, politics isn't not only that. And I think also for voters, it's important to think about that. Mm-hmm. So an entertaining candidate might be good, and might be good to bring across a good message. And being on message is good, but never forget that you have to do something different after the election.
Sure. And then, and I'm agreeing. I agree with you. It's amazing to me. I think I read somewhere not long ago that I think 33 or 35% of all content on Twitter is political content. Wow. And not just politicians tweeting, but all conversation on Twitter, like at least a third of it is political content, which maybe not all of it is the most healthy debate. It can get pretty vicious and name calling, and I can't remember the name of the principle. There's some law that someone defined where the idea is that it takes maybe 5 or 6 exchanges back and forth for somebody to compare something to Nazi Germany.
Oh, gosh, yeah.
I can't remember what that every debate about, no matter where it starts, it can be about which fast food restaurant is better, that eventually within 7 or 8 exchanges, something will be compared to, well, McDonald's is no better than the Nazis. It's some principle, I can't remember what it's called, but we found it very amusing. But, I guess in a way, at least people are thinking and talking about politics. I mean, I wish it were in a less sniping way, in a more constructive way, but at least people are talking about it and thinking about it. So if Twitter and media has helped bring politics to the forefront, then that's probably helpful.
Yeah, this will be the next chapters to be written. So when it comes to Gen Z and entering politics, they will find their way, and they probably will use Twitter and TikTok and other platforms that are not around yet. But that's what we probably think could learn. So we had print, we had radio, we had television, we have digital platforms, and every step fed into the fabric of politics and changed the way how politicians had to react to that. And this will go on.
Absolutely.
It's funny, I had seen a comedian recently talking about political influence on the internet, misinformation, social media, and saying, I know everyone's scared of this, but I have great hope for, Gen Z, because they know how to work this. They know how to get around it. And he's like, but putting a cell phone or social media in the hands of a boomer, look what happens. It was just really funny. It was like, it's like giving a baby a knife.
Interesting.
So, I like the idea that you can't entirely you can maybe sell yourself in the beginning, but you do have to come up, and that has played out that way. You do have to come up with policy.
Sure.
Thank you all for being here, and this has been great.
Great question.